And also, I have received, reviewed, and considered the formal probation report in this case. At this time, on the part of the defense, does the defense wish to call anyone or otherwise make any statements? Mr. Chernoff?
I just want to make a brief statement, Judge.
Will the defense be calling anybody to speak?
No, Judge. We will not.
All right. May I indicate that as I did before, that Dr. Murray has an absolute right to address the court at sentencing. It's his personal right, and if Dr. Murray wants to speak at sentencing, he certainly will be able to. Would you want to inquire of Dr. Murray whether he wishes to speak or not, Mr. Chernoff?
I spent 2 hours with him yesterday in the lockup to discuss this very issue. He doesn't want to speak, and I want to be brief.
You may. Thank you.
Judge, as you noted, we presented a 45-page sentencing memorandum. It was as complete as it could be. Attached to that were 35 letters of recommendation, reference, support from Dr. Murray's families, friends, patients. That was about as complete as we can get as well. We do not disagree with the prosecution that this is a tragedy, and what we lost with Michael Jackson and what his children lost certainly demands punishment. I do wonder, though, to what extent the court considers the entirety of a man's book of life as opposed to just one chapter. The 2 months that Dr. Murray was treating Michael Jackson, he did so regrettably. He shouldn't have done it. But when we talk about vulnerability, we're going to be honest about vulnerability. Michael Jackson was a drug seeker, and he sought it out from Dr. Murray, who was wrong in providing it. He sought it out from other doctors. He was a powerful, famous, wealthy individual with lawyers, and security, and staff, and advisors. Maybe he was vulnerable. Maybe you agree with the prosecution. But what about before those 2 months? What about Dr. Murray's life before those 2 months? Before he was convinced or was decided based on suggestions or however you want to portray it to give Michael Jackson propofol? What about that life? I'm going to assume that His Honor believes that this is a case that demands incarceration. I make that assumption because of things that have been said and done. He was remanded after the verdict, and you said, and you believed at the time, that if you hadn't done that, he would be a danger to the community. 58-year-old cardiologist who now resides in a 5-foot by 8.5-foot cell. On Monday nights, he gets to see the stars because they take him up to the roof, shackled everywhere he goes. But he's not a danger to the community, I'll grant you that. And maybe you still feel that way. Maybe you feel that that's the kind of thing that should continue because he has to be in protective custody, and that's what will continue. But what about the rest of his life? What about before Michael Jackson asked for propofol? What about that? He spent 56 years. He's 56 years in June of 2009. 56 years. He never committed a crime. He was never ran afoul of the law. He had raised a family. I understand the tragedy with regard to Michael Jackson's children. I have children. We all have children. His children are here. He has a kid in college, 2 more in high school. He's got a 2.5-year-old just now beginning to literally can read. It's amazing. In Santa Monica. Does any of that matter at all, is the question that I have for the court. If we're going to start with 4 years that the prosecution believes is appropriate, does any of that matter when you make your determination? For 58 years, Dr. Murray, he was born in the West, in Grenada. Illegitimate mother. Illegitimate. His mom, his dad, he didn't know his dad. They weren't just poor, they were literally dirt poor. At the age of 10 is when he got electricity in his community. But he took that impossible situation, that situation that would have crushed, or should, and continues to crush people in that situation. He made his way to the United States, a poor, unsupported black man from the Caribbean. He put himself through college, graduated in 3 years, magna cum laude, put himself through medical school, University of Arizona after that. Does any of that matter? That's exactly what we want our neighbors and our citizens to aspire to do. And all of this was before he ever met Michael Jackson. Does any of that matter to the court at all? Maybe not. Maybe it's irrelevant. Maybe all that matters is what happened at the end. The court is aware of what Dr. Murray did. For 14 years, he prepared his life as a doctor. All he is a doctor. Now, that's gone. It's his fault. I'm not saying it's not, but it is gone. And if punishment's the point, if what you really are trying to determine is punishment as opposed to vengeance, should that be taken into consideration at all? Dr. Murray, whether he's a barista for the rest of his life, whether he's a greeter at Walmart, he's still going to be the man that killed Michael Jackson. That's really who he is now. He's not a doctor. That's who he is. Does any of that matter? You sat on the bench and you listened to 5 witnesses, 5 patients of his. He was only in private practice for 8 years. One of the witnesses you listened to was the prosecution's witness. They all told you that Dr. Murray had a positive, important impact on the quality of their life. 2 of them stated straight out they wouldn't be alive without him. 2 of them. Does any of that matter when you start at the top? Does any of that matter? Do you consider any of that? You heard from Ruby Mosley during the trial. You saw these letters that were provided. Dr. Murray, during these 8 years, despite trying to develop and build a practice, a successful practice, gave back to communities that couldn't afford his services. He traveled to the Caribbean, training doctors on use of intervention of cardiology, brought supplies to them that they couldn't afford. He opened up a clinic in Houston, Texas, my hometown, the poorest section of Houston, Texas. Didn't make any money at that. And you heard what Ruby Mosley said about that. Does any of that matter, is the question I have. Well, does any of that matter in your determination? That's the question I have. I think it should. I think it should matter what Dr. Murray has done in his life. I think it should matter. I think it should matter to everybody, frankly. I don't know about this realignment. I'm not, you and Mr. Walgren understand this better than I do. But I can tell you that putting him in a prison room there's a measure of vengeance that comes from that, and I understand that. But when the glow of vengeance has faded, he's still someone else's problem. And Dr. Murray can do things. Things on probation. He can do things for the community on probation that he could never do sitting in that little room. And I don't know what the point of punishment is, what you think it is, but I think it's what's best for the community. I think that's what needs to be looked at. And I don't see how prison would do that. All right, well, I've spoke longer than I thought I would, but you, Judge, we ask you to consider all that and what we've presented in our sentencing memorandum. Thank you.
Mr. Chernoff, thank you. Mr. Chernoff, I'd ask you the same questions I asked Mr. Walgren regarding the people's submission as to restitution. What do these requested restitution figures mean to you? What do you think I should do about this suggestion?
The figure is so high, it's hard to really to know what to tell you about that. I can tell you that Dr. Murray, if he has the ability to work, can certainly attempt to pay restitution, but he'll never be able to pay $100 million. That's not even... That's so far ahead of any possibility. There's no way to address that.
Mr. Gorgian just provided something, Mr. Chernoff. I'll give you a moment.
We're just not ready. We need things. We need receipts. We need to look at the information that Mr. Weitzman has predicted and to know about the amounts, but we aren't ready to address that.
Right. Is it otherwise submitted, Mr. Chernoff?
It is.
Mr. Walgren?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.